There was a time when someone had to walk the streets each evening just to light the lamps by hand, and when a stroll downtown might mean bumping into a street musician with a trained monkey in tow. Today, we're looking back at 10 pieces of city life that used to be everywhere, but have now mostly faded away.
Gas street lamps lit up cities long before electricity took hold. Burning fuels such as coal gas or natural gas, they gave off a soft, warm glow. First appearing in the early 1800s, they quickly spread through town squares, parks, and busy avenues. A worker known as a lamplighter would go from lamp to lamp at dusk, igniting each one, then return at sunrise to put them out. Later improvements like the gas mantle made the flames burn brighter still. Eventually, electric streetlights won out, since they ran without anyone needing to light them by hand each day. Baltimore installed a public gas lamp back in 1817, and that single lamp is credited with starting the nation's very first gas utility company.
Phone booths were compact, enclosed spaces, built so people could place calls in public. Their popularity took off after William Gray patented the coin-operated payphone in 1889. By the middle of the 20th century, you could find one on almost any city corner, particularly downtown. Most featured glass sides and a door, a payphone mounted inside, and often a phone directory hanging nearby. Their numbers began dropping in the 1980s as designs shifted and mobile phones started catching on. Roughly 2 million booths were still standing as of 1999, though only a small handful survive now. The landmark case Katz v. United States helped cement the principle that a person has a reasonable expectation of privacy while making a call from inside one.
Newsboys, sometimes called newsies, used to fill city sidewalks calling out the day's headlines to catch people's attention. Rather than being paid employees of the papers, they bought stacks of copies up front and pocketed whatever profit they made reselling them. Many came from struggling families and sold papers to help make ends meet at home. Their shifts often fell early in the morning or late at night, hawking papers on corners or weaving through crowds. Occasionally, the headline they shouted wasn't even printed inside. It was just a hook to move more copies. A notable newsboy strike broke out in New York City in 1899 and pushed for improved conditions for these young sellers. Penny arcades offered a place where a single cent bought you a turn at some kind of machine or game. They sprang up in the late 1800s, often clustered along boardwalks or in lively city districts. Visitors could test out fortune-telling booths, wind-up music machines, or small viewers that played brief films. There were no prizes to win. The novelty itself was the draw. As technology moved forward, these arcades evolved too, and by the mid-1900s, many had added pinball tables and the earliest video games. Among the oldest surviving coin-operated devices is what the butler saw, built in 1895.
Fire alarm call boxes used to stand on street corners across many cities, ready to summon the fire department the moment someone spotted trouble. A telegraph-based signal inside each box would transmit a coded message pinpointing its location. Every box carried its own number, tied to a particular block or crossing. To trigger one, a person simply pulled a hook or twisted a knob to send the mechanical alert. Cell phones and 911 service made most of them obsolete, though some cities have kept a few running as a fallback during outages. Boston actually relied on a working call box in 2018 when a 911 outage struck and a fire needed reporting.
Fallout shelters sprang up across cities during the Cold War, meant to shield the public from radiation in the event of a nuclear strike. They were commonly built into the basements of schools, government offices, and office buildings. Each shelter kept a 2-week supply of food, water, first aid materials, and equipment for detecting radiation. Officials also urged ordinary citizens to build their own shelters at home, ideally underground and reinforced with earth or concrete. Bright yellow and black signage made official shelters easy to spot at a glance. This whole push was part of a broader civil defense effort that ramped up as Cold War anxieties grew in the late 1940s. More than 1 million of those fallout signs were manufactured, and quite a few still hang in place today. long after the shelters themselves stopped being used.
Horse-drawn streetcars carried city dwellers around town throughout the 1800s. Running along metal tracks set into the street, they were pulled by horses rather than any kind of motor. Compared with ordinary wagons, the rails made for a far smoother ride and eased the strain on the horses. Passengers handed over a small fare to ride inside a roofed car as it followed a set route. These streetcars let cities expand, since commuters could now live further from their jobs. Electric streetcars eventually replaced them, offering greater speed and no need for feeding or rest. A single New York streetcar operator once kept a stable of more than 8,000 horses just to run its lines.
Organ grinders were a familiar sight on city streets in the late 1800s and early 1900s. These street performers cranked a handle to produce music from a mechanical instrument, frequently accompanied by a monkey gathering tips from onlookers. A great many grinders were immigrants, particularly from Italy, earning a living through their performances. The tunes came from barrels fitted with pins, or later from paper rolls, though the range of music was fairly limited. Public opinion gradually turned against them, with many viewing the noise as a nuisance and associating the grinders with begging or petty crime. New York City banned barrel organs from its streets in 1935, and a large number of the instruments were subsequently destroyed. Before recordings became widespread, these organs were one of the only ways ordinary people could hear a favorite melody played again. Cobblestone streets were once standard in older cities. Builders used naturally smoothed stones, typically gathered from riverbeds or open fields. Laborers set them by hand into a bed of sand or mortar to form sturdy, long-lasting roads. Unlike dirt paths, cobblestone surfaces held up in wet weather without turning to mud or dust. They also gave horses better footing, making travel a bit safer overall. As smoother paving like asphalt and concrete became standard, cobblestone streets grew increasingly rare. In older neighborhoods, worn-away asphalt sometimes reveals the original cobblestone still sitting underneath. Boston and Charleston, South Carolina are both known for having kept large stretches of their cobblestone streets intact.
Elevator operators made riding an elevator in the early 1900s a very different experience than it is now. Cabs were controlled by hand with a lever that adjusted their speed. A skilled operator had to line the car up precisely with each floor, which took real practice to master. In department stores especially, operators did more than just run the elevator. They'd call out each floor's merchandise and sometimes pitch ongoing sales. Once automatic push-button elevators became standard by the mid-1900s, the role largely disappeared. That said, a handful of older buildings, luxury residences, and historic landmarks still employ operators. As of 2017, more than 50 buildings in New York City still kept elevator operators on staff.
And that's 10 pieces of city life that quietly disappeared while nobody was looking. From gaslit streets to elevator operators calling out the sales floor, it's wild to think how much of what once felt permanent just faded away. So tell us, if you could bring back just one of these, which would it be? Drop it in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this little trip back in time, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We're digging up more forgotten pieces of history every week, and you won't want to miss the next one. Like this video if you made it to the end. It really helps us out. See you next one.